The Midnight Ambassador. The moons of Helios 9 were known for three things: spectacular auroras, hostile indigenous life, and being utterly forgettable to the rest of the galaxy. This made them perfect for someone looking to disappear. Cassandra Zhou had been perfectly content with disappearing. 3 standard years of blessed obscurity, broken only by supply drones and the occasional distress call from miners who'd wandered too close to the sulfur geysers. She'd built her reputation carefully, the eccentric terraforming specialist who could restructure an atmosphere in half the time of a corporate team, who accepted payment in rare elements and asked no questions. The knock came at 26:43 local time, that awkward hour when both moons hung low and cast competing shadows across the craggy landscape. Cass was elbow-deep in the guts of an atmospheric modulator, her dark hair pulled back in a messy knot, when the security system chimed. "Visitor at perimeter gate," announced the disembodied voice of her home system. Cass froze, her wrench suspended mid-turn. No one visited. That was the point of living on the dark side of a forgotten moon. "Identity?" she asked, wiping her hands on her already stained utility pants. "Unknown. Biometric scan suggests non-human physiology." Curiosity trumped caution. Cass grabbed her pulse pistol from its charging dock and moved toward the airlock. Through the external cameras, she could see a figure wrapped in a traveling cloak, the fabric shimmering slightly against the purple-tinged darkness, adaptive camouflage, expensive and rare. "Purse," she called to her semi-intelligent monitoring system, defensive protocols active. "Acknowledged," the system replied. "Visitor appears unarmed but registering unusual energy signatures." With a deep breath, Cass cycled the airlock. The outer door slid open with a hydraulic hiss. The figure stood motionless for a moment, then reached up with gloved hands to lower the hood. Cass felt her chest constrict, a reaction no breathing exercise could control. Those luminescent eyes were unmistakable, pale lavender with concentric rings that shifted in different lighting, set in a face too perfectly proportioned to be human. The visitor's skin had a subtle iridescence, like mother-of-pearl, and delicate, nearly translucent filaments that might be mistaken for hair by the casual observer rippled gently despite the absence of wind. "High Counselor Nix," Cass said, her voice betraying more emotion than she intended. "I thought you'd be busy orchestrating harmony among the 87 worlds or whatever your official title claims these days." "It's just Lyra now," the visitor replied, her voice carrying that distinctive harmonic quality unique to Etherians, like each word contained its own echo. "The High Council position has been compromised." Cass leaned against the doorframe, pulse pistol lowered but not holstered. "You've traveled 17 parsecs to tell me you got fired." Could have sent a calm burst. A ghost of a smile touched Lyra's lips. "May I come in, Cassandra? The atmospheric composition here is challenging for my respiratory system." "Since when do Etherians struggle with atmospheric variation?" "I've seen you breathe nitrogen-sulfur mixes like premium oxygen." "Since I've spent the last 72 hours evading assassins without rest or proper sustenance." That got Cass's attention. She stepped aside, gesturing with the pistol. "Fine. But if this is another recruitment attempt for one of your grand cosmic projects, I'm shoving you right back into the airlock." Lyra glided past her, the subtle scent of ozone and something like vanilla following in her wake. Inside the habitat module, the difference between them became more pronounced. Where Cass was all practical efficiency, muscled arms from years of mechanical work, utilitarian clothing, movements precise and economical, Lyra possessed an ethereal quality. Even exhausted, she moved like gravity was merely a suggestion. "Your dwelling is functional," Lyra observed, taking in the cluttered workbenches, half-dismantled equipment, and the small living space that clearly prioritized practicality over comfort. "Not all of us need crystalline spires and gravity-defying furniture," Cass muttered, securing the airlock and returning the pistol to its dock. "What trouble have you brought to my doorstep, Lyra?" Lyra sank gracefully onto the one chair not covered in tools or parts. "The collective has fallen." Cass barked a laugh. "Right. And I'm the Empress of Old Earth. The Etherian collective has existed for 12,000 years. It doesn't just fall. It does when infiltrated by the void harmonics. The name hung in the air like a toxic gas. Cass felt a chill run through her, memories surfacing that she'd spent years burying under work and isolation. That's impossible, she said quietly. We destroyed their conversion array. You and I, we watched it implode. We destroyed one array, Lyra corrected. They had others. Sleeper agents. They've been patient, Cassandra. So patient. And now they've taken control of the collective synchronization network. Cass slumped against her workbench. The synchronization network was the most sophisticated communication system in the known galaxy, capable of instantaneous transmission across vast distances without the lag of traditional subspace channels. If the void harmonics controlled it. How many worlds have they turned, she asked. 32 confirmed. Possibly more. Lyra's fingers twitched, a rare sign of distress from an Etherian. They've evolved their techniques. It's more subtle now. No obvious physical changes, just a gradual shift in priorities, decision-making, emotional responses. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, entire governments have been compromised. And they tried to convert you? Lyra's luminescent eyes darkened momentarily. They tried. My physiology proved resistant. A benefit of our previous encounter with them, perhaps. When conventional conversion failed, they arranged an accident. I barely escaped. Cass ran a hand through her hair, dislodging it further from its knot. So you've come to hide out here. I hate to break it to you, but this moon isn't exactly equipped for long-term Etherian habitation. I've come for your help, Cassandra. I'm a terraformer, not a revolutionary. You're both, Lyra said softly. And you're the only person in this galaxy who understands both Etherian biotechnology and void harmonic conversion principles. Cass turned away, busying herself with the organization of tools that needed no organizing. That was a lifetime ago. It was 3 standard years. A lifetime, Cass repeated firmly. Lyra rose, moving with that fluid grace that always made Cass feel somehow both enchanted and inadequate. She approached until she stood just behind Cass, close enough that the terraformer could feel the subtle temperature difference Etherians naturally emanated. I wouldn't have come if there were any other way, Lyra said, her voice lower, the harmonic undertones more pronounced with emotion. I know what it cost you last time. Cass closed her eyes, memories flooding back, the mission, the desperate race to stop the conversion array, the choice she'd had to make when everything went wrong. The choice between saving the population of Vega Prime and saving the woman she'd foolishly allowed herself to love. What exactly are you proposing? Cass asked without turning around. There's a prototype in the ancient archives on Vespera Station, a quantum disruption field that could destabilize their control over the synchronization network. Vespera Station is in collective space. If what you're saying is true, it's probably already under void harmonic control. Not the deep archives. They're shielded. Old technology the harmonics can't easily penetrate. And you need me because the archives respond to specific genetic and neural patterns. Because you're already coded for access from our previous mission. Because, Lyra hesitated, then continued more softly, because despite everything, I trust you with my life, Cassandra. Cass finally turned, finding herself mere inches from those lavender eyes. Up close, she could see the toll of Lyra's escape, subtle stress patterns in her iridescent skin, the normally vibrant filaments of her hair dulled to a matte sheen. The last time I helped you save the galaxy, Cass said carefully, I lost 3 fingers, gained 17 interesting scars, and had my heart broken in at least 4 different ways. Why would I sign up for that again? Lyra's expression softened. Because despite your best efforts to become a reclusive misanthrope, you still care about the fate of innocent beings. Because the void harmonics won't stop with the collective, they'll spread throughout the galaxy, converting every sentient mind into their twisted hive mind. And because, a faint smile touched her lips. Because you've spent 3 years hiding on this forsaken rock, and deep down, you're bored out of your brilliant mind. Cass wanted to argue, but the truth in those words stung too sharply. She glanced around her habitat, at the increasingly complex projects she'd created just to keep her mind occupied, at the makeshift calendar where she'd stopped marking the days months ago. I have a terraforming contract on Procyon Beta, she said, a token protest. The atmosphere can wait another few weeks to be breathable. Cass sighed. If, and I mean if, I were to help you, what's your plan? The two of us against an ancient, mind-controlling collective that's already taken over half the civilized galaxy. Lyra's expression turned serious. Not just the two of us. There are others, a resistance forming. Beings whose minds resist the conversion, for various reasons. They need someone who understands the enemy, who knows how to fight them. And after? Assuming we don't die spectacularly? Cass asked. You go back to your crystal spires and cosmic governance, and I go back to reshaping uninhabitable rocks. Something flickered across Lyra's face, vulnerability, perhaps, or regret. That would be your choice, Cassandra. It always has been. A long moment passed between them, heavy with unspoken history. I need to finish this modulator, Cass finally said. Perse can show you to the guest quarters, such as they are. Get some rest. We'll talk specifics in the morning. Lyra inclined her head slightly, a gesture of acceptance. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Cass replied. I haven't agreed to anything. But as she watched Lyra follow her system's holographic guide toward the small adjoining chamber, Cass knew she was already packing mentally for the journey. Some forces in the universe were simply too powerful to resist, interstellar conspiracies, existential threats to all sentient life, and apparently, the return of the one being who had ever made her feel truly alive. She turned back to her atmospheric modulator with a resigned sigh. Perse, better run diagnostics on the shuttle. I have a feeling we're going to need it operational sooner rather than later. Acknowledged, replied the system. And Specialist Joe? Yes. Your vital signs indicate elevated endorphin levels despite your outward reluctance. Shall I update your status to cautiously exhilarated rather than contentedly isolated? Cass threw a wrench at the nearest sensor node. Mind your own atmospheric business. As she worked through the night, the familiar rhythm of calibration and fine-tuning failed to calm her racing thoughts. The galaxy was in danger, her carefully constructed solitude was shattered, and the woman who had once been the center of her universe was sleeping in the next room. The adventure that had once nearly destroyed her was beginning again. The nebula's heart. The shuttle shouldn't have made it through the Carina Nebula. By all reasonable engineering standards, the patchwork craft that Cassandra Jo had cobbled together from salvaged parts and questionable upgrades should have disintegrated the moment they hit the turbulent plasma streams. You modified the shield harmonics, Lyra observed, her luminescent eyes fixed on the swirling gases outside the viewport. Colors no human language had names for danced around their ship, occasionally striking the shields with explosive bursts. Among other things, Cass replied, her hands steady on the manual controls. She preferred tactile interface over neural links, another quirk that had once fascinated Lyra. The nebula's gotten more volatile since we last passed through. Someone's been mining the stellar nurseries again. Lyra's expression darkened. The harmonics. They consume cosmic energies to fuel their conversion processes. Seems wasteful. These nurseries could birth new star systems, given a few million years. They don't think in terms of creation anymore. Only consumption and conversion. Lyra's voice carried a weight Cass had rarely heard before. Is that why you left? Because you saw it happening to me too? The question hung between them like the plasma clouds outside, dangerous, volatile, beautiful. Cass kept her eyes fixed ahead. We're approaching the passage. Better secure yourself. The passage was a theoretical tunnel of relatively stable space through the nebula, theoretical because it shifted constantly and had never appeared on any official star charts. Cass had discovered it during a desperate escape 3 years earlier and prayed it still existed. As they plunged deeper into the maelstrom, the shuttle's systems blared warnings. Cass silenced them with practiced flicks of switches. "Perse, activate the resonance field," she ordered. "Activating," the system replied. "Field stability at 68% and fluctuating." A vibration passed through the ship, and suddenly the chaos outside resolved into patterns, currents of energy flowing around them rather than against them. "You perfected it," Lyra whispered, genuine awe in her voice. "Had 3 years and not much else to do," Cass muttered, though a hint of pride crept into her tone. For 20 tense minutes, they navigated the passage, the shuttle dancing through cascades of stellar matter that could have incinerated them in microseconds. When they finally emerged on the other side, the starfield that greeted them was unfamiliar to most galactic travelers, a dense cluster of ancient stars circling a massive black hole. "The Vesperan complex," Lyra said softly. "Few remember it still exists." "That's the point of a secure archive," Cass replied, setting course for a barely visible structure floating in the distance. "Although your people certainly didn't make it easy to reach." As they approached, the structure resolved into an immense station, not the sleek, crystalline architecture typical of Etherian design, but something ancient and almost organic. Concentric rings rotated at different velocities around a central sphere, creating a hypnotic, almost disorienting visual effect. "It predates the collective," Lyra explained, her eyes reflecting the ancient structure. "Built by my ancestors during the first expansion, before we fully understood what we were becoming." Cass brought the shuttle into a slow approach pattern. "No defense systems. None that you can detect. The station's protections are more sophisticated." As if on cue, a beam of pale light swept over their craft, lingering for several seconds before disappearing. "Identity confirmed," announced a melodic voice unlike Perse's practical tones. "Welcome, Emissary Nix." "Welcome, Specialist Joe. Your return was anticipated." Cass shot Lyra a questioning look. "Anticipated? By whom?" Lyra looked equally puzzled. "The archive has limited sentience, but it shouldn't be expecting us." "Docking protocols initiated," the station's voice continued. "Please prepare for guided approach." The shuttle's controls went dead under Cass's hands as the station took over. A subtle gravitational field enveloped them, drawing them toward one of the smaller docking rings. "I don't like this," Cass muttered, reaching for her pulse pistol. "Nor do I," Lyra agreed, her own posture shifting subtly into one Cass recognized from their previous missions, alert, ready for conflict. "But the station doesn't appear hostile. Merely, prepared." The docking process completed with disconcerting smoothness. When the airlock cycled open, they were greeted not by the expected automated systems but by a figure waiting patiently in the corridor beyond, a humanoid form composed of what appeared to be flowing light and shadow. "Curator Thorne," Lyra breathed, surprise evident in her voice. The figure inclined its head, or what passed for a head in its luminous anatomy. "High Counselor. Specialist. Your timing is fortuitous. You're supposed to be dead," Lyra said bluntly. "The records state you were lost during the schism 3 centuries ago." "Reports of my dissolution were politically expedient," the curator replied, its voice resonating not through air but seemingly directly in their minds. "Please follow. We have little time." Cass gripped her weapon tighter but followed Lyra as she stepped through the airlock. The station's interior was vast and eerily empty, corridors curving gently in ways that suggested they followed some complex mathematical principle rather than practical design. "The Void Harmonics have already sent agents," Curator Thorne said as they walked. "They breached the outer archives 2 standard days ago." "That's impossible," Lyra protested. "The outer archives are protected by quantum encryption and temporal locks. They have evolved, Emissary Nix. As you discovered to your detriment." The curator's form flickered momentarily. They now possess technology capable of bypassing our older defense systems. How many? Cass asked, the tactician in her assessing threats. 5 physical agents, accompanied by conversion spores. They are currently contained in the historical wing, but the containment will not hold indefinitely. They reached what appeared to be a dead end, but the wall dissolved at the curator's approach, revealing a circular chamber filled with floating crystalline structures, data storage unlike anything used in modern systems. The quantum disruptor, Lyra said, eyes scanning the archives. It should be in the weapons research section. It is no longer there, the curator replied. After your last encounter with the harmonics, I took the liberty of relocating certain sensitive technologies. The curator gestured, and one of the crystals detached from its position, floating toward them. As it neared, Cass could see that it wasn't a single crystal but a complex arrangement of smaller fragments, constantly shifting and realigning around a central core. This contains the specifications, the curator explained. But constructing the device will require components we no longer possess here. Let me guess, Cass said dryly. They're scattered across heavily guarded locations in harmonic-controlled space. Not quite so dramatic, Specialist Joe. The primary components are stored in 3 secure locations. One here, one on the abandoned research outpost in the Lyran Drift, and the third. The curator hesitated, its luminous form dimming slightly. The third? Lyra prompted. The third component was entrusted to you, Emissary Nix. It resides within your physiological matrix. Lyra went very still. Within me? I carry no such technology. Not consciously, the curator corrected. The final component was integrated with your neural structure during your recovery after the Vega Prime incident. It was deemed the safest repository, as your unique physiology made you resistant to harmonic conversion. Cass stared at Lyra, pieces falling into place. That's why they couldn't convert you. Not just resistance from previous exposure, you're literally carrying anti-harmonic tech in your brain. Without my knowledge or consent, Lyra added, her voice dangerously quiet. The curator's form pulsed in what might have been apology. The High Council authorized the procedure. They believed. They had no right, Lyra snapped, and for a moment, the air around her shimmered with barely contained energy. Etherians rarely lost control of their emotions, but when they did, the results could be spectacular, and dangerous. Cass stepped forward, placing a hand on Lyra's arm. The contact was jarring. Etherian skin had a distinctive texture, somewhere between silk and static electricity. We can address the ethical violations after we save the galaxy from mind control. Right now, we need that component. Lyra's eyes met hers, and Cass saw something there she hadn't expected, fear. Extraction may not be survivable. Actually, the curator interjected, that is not entirely accurate. The component was designed to be retrievable, though the process is not without risk. A low rumble shook the chamber, dust drifting down from surfaces that hadn't been disturbed in centuries. They've breached the secondary containment, the curator announced. We must proceed immediately. How long do we have? Cass asked, mentally cataloging their weapons and escape routes. Perhaps 30 minutes before they locate this chamber. And how long does your extraction process take? Approximately 28 minutes. Cass and Lyra exchanged glances. I'll hold them off, Cass said, checking her pulse pistol's charge. Absolutely not, Lyra replied. If anyone stays behind. This isn't a negotiation, Cass cut her off. I'm the tactical specialist, you're the one with tech in your brain. Besides, she added with a grim smile, I've gotten pretty good at narrow escapes. Before Lyra could protest further, the curator intervened. There is another option. The center of the archive contains a temporal stasis field. If you can lure the harmonics there, they can be temporarily contained. Temporarily being the operative word, Cass noted. It would buy us several hours. Another tremor shook the chamber, stronger this time. The stasis field, Lyra decided. We go together or not at all. The look she gave Cass brooked no argument, and despite everything, their history, the mission, the galaxy at stake, Cass felt a surge of something warm and forgotten. Recognition, perhaps. This was the Lyra she had fallen for, determined, principled, insufferably noble. Fine, she conceded. But we do this smart. Curator, we need schematics of the station and any weapons you can spare. What followed was a frantic preparation session as the curator transferred station layouts directly into their neural buffers, a disconcerting sensation like having a map unfold inside your head. They were equipped with archive defense tools that looked like ornate jewelry but functioned as formidable weapons against harmonic physiology. Remember, the curator warned as they prepared to leave the relative safety of the archive chamber, harmonic agents in physical form are merely vessels. Destroying the body releases the spores. Which is why we don't destroy them, Cass confirmed. We lure them into the stasis field. Precisely. With a final glance at each other, they moved into the corridors, now dimmed as the station diverted power to its remaining defenses. They proceeded cautiously, guided by the mental maps the curator had provided. They encountered the first harmonic agent 3 intersections later, a being that might once have been a Centaurian before conversion. Its skin had a metallic quality now, and where eyes should have been, pulsing nodes of purple energy tracked their movement. Emissary Nix, it said, its voice multi-layered and wrong. The collective welcomes your return. Your resistance was unexpected, but ultimately futile. I think futility is a matter of perspective, Lyra replied calmly, subtly shifting her stance. The agent tilted its head, an unsettlingly mechanical movement. And you've brought the terraformer. Excellent. Your knowledge of environmental manipulation will serve the harmonics well. Hard pass, Cass replied, activating one of the archive weapons, a small disc that expanded into a shield of shimmering energy between them and the agent. The harmonic lunged with inhuman speed, but rather than attacking the shield, it leapt to the ceiling, defying gravity as it skittered along the surface like an insect. They've adapted to standard defense protocols, Lyra observed, tracking the creature's movement. Of course we have, it replied, its voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. We learn. We evolve. We perfect. It dropped suddenly, landing behind them, but Cass was already moving, throwing a second device, a sphere that erupted into a web of golden energy, temporarily ensnaring the agent. Run, she shouted, grabbing Lyra's hand. They sprinted through the corridors, making abrupt turns and backtracking according to their mental maps. Twice more they encountered harmonic agents, each time using the archive's defensive tools to create brief advantages that allowed them to continue toward the center of the station. This is too easy, Cass panted as they paused in a junction. They're hurting us. I concur, Lyra replied, barely winded despite their pace. But strangely, they appear to be hurting us precisely where we want to go. Why would they do that? Unknown. But we should proceed with extreme caution. The central chamber, when they finally reached it, was breathtaking, a vast spherical space with a platform suspended in the middle, surrounded by swirling currents of what appeared to be liquid light. The platform was accessible only by a narrow bridge that materialized as they approached. The stasis controls should be on the central console, Lyra said, pointing to a structure at the center of the platform. They crossed the bridge carefully, constantly scanning for threats. The chamber remained eerily quiet. I don't like this, Cass muttered. Where are they? As if in answer, the bridge behind them disappeared, and the entrance to the chamber filled with harmonic agents, all 5 of them, standing unnaturally still. Welcome to the Nexus, said the lead agent, the converted Centaurian they had encountered first. You have done exactly as anticipated. Have we? Lyra replied calmly, moving toward the central console. The stasis field, the agent continued, requires activation from both within and without. By entering the chamber, you have positioned yourselves perfectly, for containment. Cass felt her stomach drop. They're going to trap us in stasis. Correct, terraformer. The Nix contains technology vital to our evolution. You will remain preserved until we develop the means to extract it safely. Lyra's hands moved over the console, her expression revealing nothing. A sound strategy, she conceded. Except for one detail. And what detail is that, emissary? Lyra's eyes met Cass's, and a silent message passed between them, trust me. I'm not the only one carrying anti-harmonic technology, she said clearly. The agents went rigid, their attention suddenly fixed on Cass. Scans detect no such technology in the terraformer, the lead agent stated, though uncertainty had crept into its multi-layered voice. No active technology, Lyra agreed. But during our mission to Vega Prime, Specialist Joe was exposed to prototype counterconversion nanites. They've remained dormant in her system, until now. Cass kept her face carefully neutral, despite her confusion. This was news to her. Impossible, the agent hissed. We would have detected. Would you? Lyra challenged. When your entire focus has been on me? On the obvious threat? The nanites were designed to be undetectable until activated by a specific neural signature, mine. A ripple of unease passed through the harmonic agents. They conferred silently, communicating through whatever link connected them to their collective consciousness. Cass edged closer to Lyra. What are you doing? She whispered. Creating doubt, Lyra murmured back. Harmonics operate on consensus. If they can't agree on the threat assessment. The lead agent stepped forward. A deception. Our collective wisdom rejects your claim. Are you certain? Lyra asked, her voice silky with confidence. Certain enough to risk everything? The nanites, once activated, could spread through your entire network. Every converted being, returned to their original state. Your entire collective, unraveled. Another tremor of uncertainty among the agents. If you truly believe I'm lying, Lyra continued, then by all means, activate the stasis field. But ask yourselves, why would I willingly walk into a trap? Unless the trap was meant for you. The psychological warfare was masterful. Cass watched as the agents communicated again, more urgently this time. In their shared consciousness, doubt was contagious. We will extract the technology from both of you, the lead agent finally declared, but its confidence had clearly faltered. You're welcome to try, Lyra replied, and suddenly slammed her hand down on the console. The chamber erupted into blinding light. Cass felt a wave of disorientation as time itself seemed to stutter around them. When her vision cleared, the harmonic agents were frozen in postures of alarm, caught in the stasis field that now extended from the entrance to just before the central platform. How? Cass gasped. The curator, Lyra explained, relief evident in her voice. It reconfigured the field parameters before we arrived. And the nanites? Lyra actually looked sheepish. A complete fabrication. But the harmonic's greatest weakness has always been their need for certainty. Introduce enough doubt, and their consensus breaks down. Cass stared at her, then laughed, a genuine laugh she hadn't experienced in years. You magnificent liar. I'd forgotten how terrifying you can be. Lyra's expression softened. Only when necessary. The moment stretched between them, charged with things unsaid. Then the console chimed, interrupting. The stasis field will hold them for approximately 6 hours, Lyra said, returning her attention to the mission. We should retrieve the component from here and proceed with the extraction. They worked quickly, securing a crystal similar to the one the curator had shown them from a compartment beneath the console. Then they made their way back through the now empty corridors to the archive chamber where the curator awaited. You were successful, the luminous being observed. Impressive. Skip the compliments, Cass said. We're on a countdown. Let's get that thing out of Lyra's head and get moving. The extraction process was less invasive than Cass had feared. Lyra reclined on a floating platform as the curator positioned various crystalline tools around her head. There was no cutting, no physical intrusion, instead, the tools projected fields that interacted with Lyra's neural pathways, gradually coaxing the hidden technology to the surface. Lyra remained conscious throughout, though her eyes took on a distant quality that worried Cass. She stayed close, occasionally squeezing Lyra's hand when the procedure caused obvious discomfort. "Why didn't you tell me?" Cass asked quietly while the curator focused on a particularly delicate phase of the extraction. "About what they put in your head." "I didn't know," Lyra replied, her voice strained. Though in retrospect, there were signs. Gaps in my memory. Treatments after Vega Prime that seemed excessive. "You trusted them." "I trusted the ideal of the collective. What it was supposed to represent." A shadow passed over her features. "Perhaps that made me as blind as those infected by the harmonics." Cass shook her head. "Not the same. You chose your path. Believed in something. And you didn't." Lyra's eyes focused on her with sudden clarity. "Is that why you left? Because you stopped believing?" The question struck too close to truths Cass had avoided for 3 years. Before she could answer, the curator announced, "Extraction complete." A small device hovered above Lyra's forehead, no larger than a thumbnail, iridescent and pulsing with inner light. The final component, the curator confirmed, guiding it into a containment field where it joined the other 2 pieces they had retrieved. "Now we must calibrate the disruptor." As the curator worked, Lyra sat up slowly, pressing a hand to her temple. "That was unpleasant. Are you okay?" Cass asked, concern evident in her voice. "I believe so. Though I feel different. As if something that was filtering my thoughts is now gone." She looked at Cass with an intensity that made the terraformer uncomfortable. "I have clarity I haven't experienced in years." Before Cass could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the station. "The stasis field," the curator announced. "It's failing prematurely." "How long do we have?" Cass demanded. "Minutes at most. The harmonics must have found a way to accelerate their temporal perception." The curator worked faster, assembling the 3 components into a device that grew increasingly complex as it self-organized. "The calibration is at 70%. I need more time." "We don't have more time," Cass said grimly. She turned to Lyra. "Can this thing be calibrated elsewhere? On the shuttle?" "Theoretically, yes," the curator answered. "But it would require an Ethereum neural interface to complete the process." "I can provide that," Lyra said. "But we need to reach your shuttle." The decision was made in seconds. The curator transferred the partially calibrated disruptor to a containment case, which Cass secured to her utility belt. They left the archive chamber at a run, the curator guiding them toward an emergency exit route. "I cannot accompany you further," the luminous being said as they reached a service airlock. "My existence is bound to the station." "What will happen to you when the harmonics break through?" Lyra asked. "I have initiated the archive's purge protocols. The knowledge stored here cannot be allowed to fall into their possession." "But you'll be destroyed," Cass protested. "This physical manifestation, yes. But my core consciousness will disperse through subspace. Perhaps, when the crisis has passed, I will reform." The curator's form flickered. "Now go. The galaxy's fate depends on your success." They had no choice but to comply. The service airlock led to a maintenance tunnel that connected to an auxiliary docking bay where, miraculously, their shuttle waited. "Purse," Cass called as they boarded. "Emergency startup sequence." "Acknowledged," the system replied. "Warning, hostile entities detected approaching the docking bay." "How long until we can launch?" "Engine warm-up requires 45 seconds. "We may not have 45 seconds, Lyra observed, looking at the airlock they had just sealed. Metal groaned as something powerful struck it from the other side. Cass took the pilot's seat, bypassing safety protocols to accelerate the warm-up. "Lyra, start the disruptor calibration." "I'll get us out of here." As Lyra connected with the device, her eyes taking on that eerie, distant quality again, Cass worked the shuttle's controls with desperate efficiency. The airlock bulged inward as the harmonics continued their assault. 30 seconds to launch, Perse announced calmly. The airlock buckled further, a crack appearing in the metal. Lyra? Cass prompted. Calibration at 84%, she replied, her voice distorted by the neural interface. I need more time. Time is in short supply right now, Cass muttered, watching as the crack in the airlock widened. Perse, redirect auxiliary power to the forward shields. We're going to need them. The airlock finally gave way just as the engines roared to life. Through the breach poured the harmonic agents, moving with unnatural speed. Hang on! Cass shouted, ramming the throttle forward. The shuttle shot from the docking bay, knocking aside the first of the agents. But the others leapt, latching onto the hull with magnetized limbs. We have hitchhikers, Cass announced grimly. Calibration at 92%, Lyra reported. We need to keep them outside the hull until it's complete. Easier said than done. Cass executed a series of maneuvers that would have torn a normal shuttle apart, using the intense gravitational forces near the black hole to try to dislodge their unwanted passengers. Warning lights flashed across the console as the hull integrity was tested to its limits. 96%, Lyra called over the groaning of stressed metal. A massive impact shook the shuttle. One of the harmonics had reached the viewport and was attempting to breach it, the converted Centaurian's metallic fists leaving fracture patterns in the reinforced material. I can't shake them, Cass shouted, executing another desperate maneuver. How much longer? 98, 99. The viewport cracked further. Another impact would shatter it. Calibration complete, Lyra announced. Activate it. Cass ordered. It's not that simple. The disruptor needs to be connected to a transmitter powerful enough to reach the synchronization network. Like what? Like the station we just left, Lyra said grimly. Cass stared at her in disbelief. You're saying we need to go back? Another hit, and the viewport's integrity warning flashed red. No, Lyra said, a new resolve in her voice. There's another way. The shuttle's communication array, if I can reconfigure it to amplify the disruptor's signal. Do it, Cass agreed, having no better options. As Lyra worked, Cass continued evasive maneuvers, trying to minimize the impacts from their persistent attackers. The shuttle groaned in protest, systems failing in cascading sequences. Hull breach in Section 3, Perse reported. Emergency containment activated. How long will that hold? Cass demanded. Approximately 2 minutes at current stress levels. Lyra worked frantically, physically connecting the disruptor to the shuttle's communication systems and rerouting power through her own neural pathways to boost the signal. This will burn out the entire communication system, she warned. Better than the alternative, Cass replied, watching as another section of the hull began to buckle. It's ready, Lyra finally announced. But there's a complication. Just once, I'd like no complications, Cass muttered. What is it? The signal requires a continuous neural interface to maintain coherence. I need to remain connected throughout the transmission. And? Lyra hesitated. And the neural feedback will likely cause significant damage to my synaptic pathways. Cass's hands froze on the controls. You mean it could kill you? It's possible. The shuttle shuddered as another breach warning sounded. No, Cass said firmly. We find another way. There is no other way, Lyra insisted. Not in the time we have left. Their eyes met across the cabin, and in that moment, 3 years of separation dissolved. I can't lose you again, Cass said, the admission torn from some place she'd kept sealed since Vega Prime. You never lost me, Lyra replied softly. I lost myself. In duty, in the collective. I thought I was serving a greater purpose, but I was just hiding. From what I felt. From what we could have been. Another impact rocked the shuttle. 1 minute to containment failure, Perse announced. Lyra's expression turned resolute. I'm activating the disruptor. Before Cass could protest further, Lyra closed her eyes, the neural connection intensifying. The disruptor began to pulse with blinding light, and through the cracking viewport, Cass saw the harmonic agents react, writhing, their metallic forms distorting as the signal attacked the very basis of their conversion. The shuttle systems flickered and died one by one as all power was diverted to the transmission. Only life support and minimal thrust remained. Lyra's face contorted in pain, lines of energy crawling across her skin from the neural interface points. Lyra, Cass called, leaving the controls to move to her side. Stay with me. The signal is transmitting, Lyra managed through gritted teeth. Across the network. Outside, the harmonic agents had stopped their assault. They floated limply against the hull, the purple energy in their eye sockets fading to darkness. It's working, Cass said urgently. You can stop now. Lyra shook her head minutely. Must complete transmission. The energy coursing over her skin intensified, and Cass could see it was causing damage. Lyra's iridescent complexion was dulling, the delicate filaments of her hair beginning to crystallize. Not worth your life, Cass insisted, reaching for the neural interface connectors. Lyra's hand shot out, gripping Cass's wrist with surprising strength. My choice, she whispered. Like you, had a choice, at Vega Prime. The words hit Cass like a physical blow. At Vega Prime, she had chosen to save millions of lives over staying with Lyra. She had made the sacrifice that duty demanded. And now Lyra was doing the same. Transmission at 84%, Perse reported. The harmonic agents had begun to drift away from the shuttle, the conversion process apparently reversed. Through the viewport, Cass could see changes spreading across the station they had fled, lights flickering as systems reset, free of harmonic control. 92%. Lyra's breathing had become labored, her luminescent eyes dimming. Stay with me, Cass pleaded, holding her free hand. We're almost there. 98%. With what seemed like immense effort, Lyra focused her gaze on Cass. If we survive this, she managed, no more running away. No more running, Cass promised. Either of us. Transmission complete, Perse announced. The disruptor went dark, and Lyra collapsed. Recovery was a long process. The neural damage Lyra had sustained was severe, but not, as they had feared, irreversible. Etherian physiology, it turned out, was remarkably resilient when given proper care and time. The aftermath of the Void Harmonic's defeat was chaotic across the galaxy. Millions awakened from conversion with no memory of their actions while under control. Governments reformed, alliances were tested, and the slow process of rebuilding began. The remnants of the Etherian collective, freed from manipulation, established a new governing system, one with greater transparency and protections against the kind of infiltration that had nearly destroyed them. Cass found herself reluctantly drawn into this new political landscape. Her role in the Harmonic's defeat had made her something of a hero, though the attention made her profoundly uncomfortable. She accepted a position as a technical advisor, primarily because it allowed her to stay close to the medical facility where Lyra was recovering. 6 months after Vespra Station, Cass sat beside Lyra's recovery pod, reviewing schematics for a new defense system on her datapad. It had become her daily routine, work during the day, evenings spent talking to Lyra whether or not she showed signs of consciousness. The committee approved your proposal, Cass said to the still form. Early warning network across the outer systems. Should give us better chances against any future threats. She paused, setting the pad aside. Though honestly, I'd rather be terraforming some forgotten rock than sitting in meetings all day. You'd be much better at this political stuff than I am. To her shock, a faint voice replied, You're doing fine. Cass nearly fell out of her chair. Lyra's eyes were open, dimmer than before, but unmistakably aware. You're awake, Cass breathed, scarcely believing it despite the weeks of positive medical reports. Apparently, Lyra agreed, her voice weak but clear. How long? 6 months, 2 weeks, 4 days, Cass replied, the precise count revealing more than she intended about her vigilance. A ghost of a smile touched Lyra's lips. You counted. Had nothing better to do, Cass said, attempting nonchalance and failing utterly. Lyra studied her face. You stayed. The simple observation contained volumes, acknowledgement of their past, of Cass's tendency to run when emotions became too complex, of the promise made in what they had believed might be their final moments. I stayed, Cass confirmed softly. Lyra's hand moved slightly, and Cass took it without hesitation. The familiar texture, like silk and static electricity, sent a jolt through her that had nothing to do with Etherian biology. So, Lyra said after a moment, what happens now? Cass smiled, truly smiled, for what felt like the first time in years. Now. We figure it out together. No running away. No running away, Lyra agreed, her fingers tightening around Cass's. Outside the recovery room's viewport, the stars shone steadily against the void, the same stars they had fought to protect, the same void they had crossed to find each other again. Whatever came next, they would face it together, the terraformeran.